Aboro, Aboye, Abosheshe, and welcome to another live stream of the Ifa Orisha Community Discussion. Today's discussion is going to be Birthright Traditions. Alright, but before I get into today's live, let me open with the same Oriki that I used in the last stream. It's a very old, as I said, Oriki that was preserved by our ancestors right here in Trinidad. Moen jiba re ale, moen jiba ale oni, ale tule mi loni, momo je kulemi suku, momo je ko lemi sarun boruku, momo je ko lemi selenini, ara to en roru, ara tu en rokuku, momo je korimi, mo embe osi ire la le im. Baba, o mon, je kimi, je ire, la oro. Ashe, ashe, ashe. At this point, I would start today's lesson. As I mentioned just now, the lesson is birthrights, tradition. Alright? Every constitution in the world recognizes the rights of individuals to be identified and connected to a family and community by name and by rights of inheritance. This freedom is recognized as a fundamental human right by the United Nations in Article 15 of the Human Rights Regulations. In Europe, the first real constitution to ever be written, ensuring the rights of regular persons, were called the Magna Carta, or the Magna Charta by some, which allowed property ownership rights to be passed on to posterity by name. All of these principles underscores the importance of having the right to receive a name at birth that entitles one to a preponderance of rights. In most indigenous societies, a name carries a different type of importance, as these older civilizations fixes their focus of the spiritual virtues associated to new or old souls entering into this realm of existence. Some believe that each person's soul vibration should dictate their name, as a name should be consistent with the function of anything manifested in the realm of the physical, thereby being an identification tag which describes such. In Isheshe, our views tend to be relatively close to such ideals. However, our views vary slightly. Alright? And that is because, of course, all cultures view and practice things relatively different. Alright? The word for name in Yoruba is Oruko. In our tradition, your name is what gives essence to your very existence, as your name describes who and what you are supposed to be. It describes your mission and purpose for coming into this world. The essence of your being is determined before your birth or manifestation here in Aye. It is our belief that the details of these things are worked out while we were still in the spirit form in Orun. And it is casted into formation when we are conceived, as at this point the conditions of our existence start taking shape. Our parents that were pre-selected for us starts preparing for our arrival. During the gestational period, nature plays its role in building our bodily composition. The Yoruba word for build is mo. The planets and stars assist in this building of our biological and psychological traits. Also, the parents contribute biologically through DNA in this building process. The parents also, once the child is born, gives this child, which is also another translation for the word mo. Alright? So beside the word mo, meaning to build, it also means to guide. Alright? While O represents or means child. So creating the word O plus mo, which represent the child or the soul that needs guidance on earth. So that is how we arrive the word Omo, meaning child. Alright? So how do we recognize the new entry of a soul into our community? Well, there are 4 considerations in the naming process. Alright? The first one is called Oruko Abiso. What is Oruko Abiso? This is the chosen name by the parents or family members, specifically the elders. Alright? It highlights significant events at the time of the birth of the child. These events, of course, would relate to the traditions associated to the family. For example, their professions. So some names that are actually given to a child may be associated to the profession of the family to which this child was born into. Alright? The second consideration is called Oruko Amutorunwa. Alright? And this particular name explains the specific circumstances surrounding the birth of the child, such as the position of the child in the womb around the time of the birth. Or if twins, the names would indicate which one came first and which one came second or last. Alright? The order, that particular order is important because the child that comes out last is considered to be the elder of the two or of the twins. Alright? So the children are given names to indicate which order the birth took place in. Alright? The next or third type of name is called Oruko Oriki. Alright? And this particular style of reciting could be poetic, it could be in the form of a song, alright, it could be in different ways. But this is an Oriki designed to describe the child's family background or to express the parents' hopes and aspirations for the child. Alright, but this particular one is in the form of an Oriki. Alright, now there is much I could say about this, but I would save that for an actual ceremony. Alright, so once you have the privilege of attending a ceremony, you may have the privilege of hearing how some of these Orikis actually sung and how they are constructed. It would be explained for the particular child. Alright, the fourth consideration or name is called an Oruko Abiku. Alright, this particular type of name is when a child that dies at birth or shortly thereafter, right? Some are born and are scheduled to die after a few years. In some cases, they die immediately, right? There are, of course, special powerful remedies that our tradition provides for such situations. So such children are given names in the positive to indicate the victory over such a birth situation. Alright, so you would hear children having names that would explain that they were born with that attachment or that agreement to them, and that it was altered ritually for them. So they would have names that would reflect that positive experience that they would have had. Alright. The fifth type of name is called an Oruko Idile. Alright. And this is an Oriki type also of one's ancestral lineage, clan, or race. Alright. This reveals the son or daughter of whom you are as an individual. Alright? So that basically is the five different types of names that could be associated to a newborn child. Alright? All of each would apply to a particular situation, circumstance, history, or expectation. Alright? So, when I spoke about in a couple of streams ago that we need to start paying attention to naming our children, the reason for this is a name is very, very important. Not only does it have a psychological effect, but it also has a spiritual element to it, which I've just explained. All right, because the name of anything is descriptive of the essence of that particular thing. So now I'm going to go a little bit further and I'm going to introduce some of the things I've mentioned, because, you know, we're trying to be as practical as we could, and we're trying to encourage our people to move in a positive direction towards bringing about the type of change that we need to see and have as a people. All right, so I don't want to just say, well, you know, we should start having naming ceremonies and don't take the time off to explain what these things entail, what they are, what are the benefits, etc., etc. So I'm now going to describe two processes that are engaged in our community, that of course I would encourage the elders as well as our leaders, as well as our young responsible people who are taking on the mantle of leadership and as being responsible members of shrines, to engage actively and to pursue this important task of returning a measure of pride, a measure of dignity to our community by having our children, our newborn children who we welcome, to take on traditional names. All right? So I'm now going to speak about what we call Esentaye. This same Esentaye is also called Akoshe Jaye, right? And we have Esentaye spelled two ways. We have it spelled with the E, and we also have it spelled with the I. All right? They all mean the same thing. All right? But dialectic variations, meaning various groups of people, depending on the dialect they speak, may call it by a slightly different name. But the rituals and the purpose of these rituals are one and the same. All right? This presents the process of knowing the destiny of a newborn baby. All right? The process will define the name given to the child together with the suitable life path, which will include do's as well as don'ts to cultivate a path intended for the child's success. All right? This is normally done on the 3rd to the 6th day of the child's birth. All right? When I'm finished reading this, I would give you some variations that exist with the local Isheshe, with what our ancestors do here in Trinidad. All right? Like all other sacred rituals, the procedure varies from one place to another. The method of divination is not the same used by every Ifa or Orisha priest or priestess. In other words, what I am saying is there are various methods of divination. All right? Now, I mentioned the local Isheshe, the local tradition. We have special rituals for twins, right? And I'm not saying that it does not exist in Yoruba land or in Cuba or in Brazil, because everybody have their own unique aspect of the practice because what was handed down to them. Also, the rituals that are done in Nigeria, in Trinidad, there are variations of how it's performed, as well as in Nigeria from one lineage to another. All right? So, beside Esentaye or Akose Jaye, there is also another important ceremony that is performed for young children. Alright? This ritual is called Imori. I-M-O-R-I. Right? And the word Imori means to know the head or to know the Ori. That's what it translates to from the etymology of the word Imori. Alright? The word Imori is Imo Ori. Alright? But it becomes Imori because of certain rules that are used when you combine two words. You drop one of the vowels. Right? Either from the first or the second word, depending on the order it appears in. Now, Imori, as I said, is another ritual that is practiced, but it is not known to many in the diaspora. Alright? Of course, Imori, as I mentioned before, means knowing the head. This ritual is to determine where the soul or the spirit of the child came from. Alright? In the great beyond. It helps determine which side of the family the baby comes from. Alright? So this will give some idea as to the characteristics of the child. Once you know which side of the lineage that this particular baby came from. This is normally performed the first 3 to 6 months of the child's life, which would mean, of course, that the parents would have had an opportunity to observe the child and the elders of the community also. Alright? This ritual gives details also about the Orisha that is associated to the child. So this, my friend, is a very important ritual. Alright? Now I want to explain a few things, because I have all type of viewers of different religions, from different parts of the world, from different cultures, and I would like to take the time off to explain to different viewers that this practice, both the Imori as well as the Akosejaye or Esentaye, is practiced in most traditions. The Jews practice it, the Hindus practice it, the Muslims practice it. They all call it by different names. They would all visit their spiritual heads to have the child prepared for this life. Alright? Now in our community, these rituals are generally very private. Alright? Some aspects of it could be performed publicly. Right? But I would explain a little bit about why there is the need for a private part of this ritual, as well as a public part of the ritual. The reason why most priests and priestesses would only perform this ritual in the presence of the parents of the child, okay, and maybe 4 elders, meaning the mother's parents and maybe the father's parents, if they decide to allow anyone else to be present, is that at this ritual, the child's future is being determined. And the type of information that is going to be provided to the parents would let the parents know what is going to help this child spiritually and what would hinder the child spiritually. So that type of information, you do not want it to be known by everyone. Also, one of the names that I've mentioned earlier that is given to the child is actually a secret name. And I would explain to you what I mean when I say a secret name. Every spirit that comes into this life has a divine name that they would have received before coming. That particular name is the name that would strengthen the child if the child was to get very, very ill. The parents would actually use an Oriki with that name that would heal the child anytime the child is going through any type of very serious situation. So that is the reason why generally is only both parents are allowed. Alright? In our tradition, and I'm explaining this for other listeners who are non-African or indigenous traditional practitioners, we consider particular things to be very sacred. And by sacred, let me explain this. Everything that exists that we know in this world has a spiritual essence. And not everything that exists is harmonious or in correspondence with our spiritual makeup. So there are particular things, when we consume them, they are what we refer to as spiritual poisons. And I will give an example for all those who are non-traditional practitioners. There are people who would go places and maybe for the first time in their life they eat a particular food. And then they would discover after consuming that particular substance that they get sick immediately. And they have to end up in the emergency room in the hospital. Modern science refers to this as an allergy. But let me tell you the real source of that. The real source of what we call an allergy in modern science and modern medicine is when a particular substance is a toxic substance to your spirit. It manifests in our bodies as an allergy. And our ancient ancestors knew these things. Modern science doesn't fully understand it, but what they have seen is the physical symptoms and effects of such things. So after that incident, the doctor will tell you, you know what? You cannot eat seafood. So whenever you go to the restaurant, avoid any type of seafood. Alright? In our tradition, we are able to tell you through divination that there are things that you should not consume, that they are not helpful to you. Alright? So let me go back now to the Esentaye. So one of the reasons why it is done only with the parents is to protect the best interests of the child. That is one. And therefore the things that are recommended or prescribed that the child must do is to the child's benefit. So therefore the parents are given the guidance that is necessary to streamline the child's life so that the child will be able to fulfill its true purpose and destiny. So these particular type of reading provides guidance. So the parents would know who their child is, what their child came here to do, so that they could assist and guide the child along the course of success. Okay, so that is the importance of Esentaye, Akosejai, and the second one that I mentioned, which is Imori. Alright, there are also other rituals, but I don't want to get too much into that. But just for today, I wanted to emphasize the importance of having an indigenous name. All right, now if you notice, the very first part of the reading when I started today, I mentioned the fact that the United Nations in Article 15 on human rights, describe the rights of every individual, the rights of a nationality, of a name that would actually tie a person into receiving inheritance from their fathers. I also mentioned the Magna Carta, all right, which the King of England provided for regular individuals. Because there was one time in human history when only dukes and nobles and sovereign people were allowed at death to pass on property to their offspring. Common people did not have that right. All right? So, besides just having a name randomly that means nothing, you must have a family name. You must have a purposeful name that identifies you as a person and that also describes where you're going in life also. All right? And here I want to mention an essay Ifa. I believe this essay Ifa was Oturopon Oyeku. There was this little boy who was born. And his parents gave him a traditional name that translated into English to "Death Cannot Harm Me." That was the young man's name. And the parents grew this child up based on the advice that they got at his birth. Same Esentaye that we're talking about, right? And also, of course, they did the Imori. So, one day, Iku, the regent that is responsible for taking people back to Orun, heard what the young man's name was and decided, who will give me such a challenge by naming a child "Death Cannot Harm Me" when I have the job of taking people back to Orun, to their maker, to Oludumare? So Death, Iku, decided to pay that child a visit. But the parents, through Eshu, I believe, were warned that such a visit was imminent. The parents visited a Babalawo or a diviner to find out what they could do to avoid death from finding their child. The Babalawo advised them. The first thing they needed to do was to change the name of the child. So we're learning now through this essay Ifa how important a name is. So they proceeded to change the name of the child. The other advice the Babalawo gave them was to take all of the child's clothes, get rid of it, give the child new clothes. So one day, Iku showed up, knocked on the door. Alright? Now, the parents didn't know who the visitor was. And Iku asked for the child by the child's previous name. The parent that went to the door said to the visitor, "Listen, there is no one here by that name." And they didn't know who the visitor was yet. But what they know is the child had a different name, so they did not answer to that name. They told the visitor, "There's no one here by that name." And that story is what saved the child. So this story speaks of A person's purpose and a person's destiny is rooted in the person's name. So I would encourage my people to give your children names that are consistent with their destiny, so that every time you call that child, you are reinforcing, you are strengthening, and you are bringing alive in your child the qualities that that child has latent built into them, or dormant, if I should use that word instead. All right, so basically that is today's lesson. I want to thank everyone who dropped in for joining us today and taking in the live stream. I also want to remind everyone that you do good for yourself. You do bad for yourself. All right? Now, all of these live videos or streams can be viewed on different platforms. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you know if you want to see this recording a second or a third time, or you want to show it to your spouse, your children, or you want to send a link to a friend. These lives or these streams are available on the Ifa Orisha Community Congress, which is on Facebook, on the Ifa Orisha Tradition Discussion Group of TNT, which is on Facebook also, the Orisha Baptist Small and Medium Business Alliance, which is on Facebook also, the Grassroots Education and Entertainment Network, which is on Facebook also, the Traditional Herbal Health Network International, which is on Facebook also, the Ifa Orisha Institute of Sacred and Divine Science, which is also on Facebook. We are also on YouTube on the Ifa Bemero, home of Ifa Orisha Tradition. Right? We are also again on Facebook on the Ifa Orisha Tradition Teaching Group of TNT. We are also on the Think Tank Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the Autochthonous Island People Traditional Community. All right, I'd like to say, may the Most High bless you, bless your children, bless your family, bless your community, and bless our country by extension. Odabo, and see you next week.